thank you for joining this one. We're going to do it on Bicarb Soda and Beta-Alanine. We'll do Beta-Alanine first and then Bicarb. I know that a lot of people are interested in Bicarb Soda at the moment, namely because a certain product or supplements company has brought out a all singing, all dancing supplement, which is their Bicarb system. I'm happy to name them. It's Maurten. So we'll go through the science of each of these products, what they are, what they do, what they supposedly do, and how to take them, and whether or not they're worth taking for endurance athletes. So as I said, Bicarb, Beta-Alanine, although I think I'm doing Beta-Alanine than Bicarb. I thought what we'd do is drop in our latest team member, Dr. Alan McCubbin, who is a sports dietitian coach, and he is part of the Fellowship of Australian Sports Dietitians. He's recently joined the team. Alan has joined us previously for talks on research into hydration and sweat management. He's done a number of studies based at Monash University in Melbourne, so he's a very welcome addition to the team. Myself, Scott, and of course Elizabeth, who's fantastic, has been working with the team and with all the athletes since day go. So yeah, just another piece of the puzzle, another beautiful addition to the expanding team. So welcome, Alan. Okay, Beta-Alanine, what is it? Does anyone take Beta-Alanine actually at this point in time? Any of the athletes? Not sure if any of you do, but anyway, Beta-Alanine is an amino acid, as it states there, and it is part of the building block of carnosine. Carnosine is also made up of another amino acid called histidine. And within that, sorry, I'm just going to, whilst we're doing this, sorry, give me 2 seconds. Histidine and, oh, come on, apologies, I'm having a malfunction. There we go. Okay. Can everyone still see Beta-Alanine? You see that screen? Just give me a thumbs up or a no. Yep, just the screen. Okay, cool. So you've got carnosine, which a lot of you or some of you may know. Okay, carnosine is found in the cytoplasm of the cell, especially muscle cells. And carnosine is or Beta-Alanine and carnosine act as an intracellular buffer. So when we talk about Bicarb Soda, we're going to be talking about extracellular buffer. For Beta-Alanine or carnosine in particular, it acts as an intracellular buffer. And when we talk about intracellular buffer, we're talking about protecting the pH, okay, of that physiological system or within the cell. So if pH drops, becomes more acidic, and more hydrogen ions applied, then it can become potentially problematic to enzymatic function and function of the actual cell. So theoretically, if carnosine content is increased via something like Beta-Alanine or histidine, but we'll talk about why you wouldn't choose histidine, then theoretically you should be better at buffering the hydrogen ion accumulation and thus offsetting the potential for fatigue. So this is all based around anaerobic glycolysis, okay, which is the predominant fuel system or energy source during high intensity intervals. So Beta-Alanine and its use is always accepted for repeated high intensity sprint efforts, which again, as an endurance athlete, you might be thinking, is this applicable to me? We've touched on so how does it work? It acts as an intracellular buffer within the muscle cell, and it also, as I said, improves the cell's ability to buffer these hydrogen ions. So what Beta-Alanine does, though, is it is a rate limiting factor to the amount of the total amount of carnosine in your muscles. Okay, your levels of carnosine due to diet is actually lower than what your muscles can actually hold. So the reason why you may consider using beta-alanine is because you can physiologically load your muscles with more carnosine than what you could get through diet. And I think that's really cool sort of concept to get your head around. So that's what it is. That's how it works, and that's what it does. As this statement says, the total dose of beta-alanine appears to be the determining factor for increasing carnosine levels in your muscle. The amount you take determines the levels that can be achieved in your muscles, not necessarily the timing. Okay, so if we think of a pre-workout supplement, which more often than not includes something like beta-alanine, taking that before your session has very little to do with the efficacy of taking beta-alanine. However, if that pre-workout that contains beta-alanine is part of your dosing regime to get the total amount of beta-alanine into your system, then that pre-workout could be beneficial. But the big take-home message here is it is the amount of beta-alanine that you consume on a daily basis over a period of time that is going to be a way more important factor in determining the ability for beta-alanine to have a positive effect on you. Okay. So if we look at beta-alanine and we look at the doses, okay, what are we looking at? The studies have ranged from 1.6 grams a day up to 12 grams a day. Effectively, what has been shown in the research is 6.4 grams per day is the minimum effective dose to get your muscles saturated, okay? There is evidence to say that if you double that amount, you can halve the time. So if you go the 6.4 grams a day for 4 weeks minimum, you will get maximum amounts of carnosine content in the muscle. If you take 12 grams a day, you could reduce that to 2 weeks. So that could be useful if you're in a press and you want to use beta-alanine for a race coming up, you haven't thought about doing it. In terms of per serve, you're probably looking at around 800 milligrams to 1600 milligrams per serve. So you can do the math on that when you're doing that. Now, the drawback with beta-alanine, if anyone has ever taken it, is that you get this sort of like facial, certainly facial, sometimes other limbs, you get this temporary paresthesia. So it feels like pins and needles all over your face, ants crawling all over your face. Feels like you might have had something bad to consume something very bad that might be having sort of this adverse reaction on you. So if you reduce the dose amount and split that across the day, then that can reduce those signs and symptoms. The caveat to that is it's a bit of a pain in the ass to take because you've got to then take it 4 or 5 times a day, which more often than not athletes forget to do, and therefore it then becomes a bit of a waste of time because the total amount of beta-alanine consumed isn't sufficient. So that's what you tend to look at that. You can take it chronically or as a maintenance dose, and this is a lot lower. So this would be something like that 1.2 to 1.6 grams a day. And you're taking that just continuously, okay, for at least 24 weeks. So you could be taking it on a longer daily basis and getting that amount through. That can offset some of those tingling effects that we mentioned. In terms of the benefits, what it's been shown in the literature is to benefit sports or activities of, say, lasting or efforts lasting somewhere between 30 seconds up to 10 minutes, okay? Time trial is generally not improved, although there are some individual sort of variations on this where it has. Yet consistently what we see is that peak power, mean power, and final power output is improved through supplementation of beta-alanine. So the question then comes to an endurance athlete who is probably not doing a whole lot of repeated sprint efforts, is it worthwhile taking? I think the cumulative effect of potentially producing more peak power, more average power and final power over the course of time during training, then it could be worthwhile. Ooh, sorry, I've just got to let these people in. Oh, I can't let them in. Sorry. Lauren, can I make you a co-host and just get you to let people in as they come in? Is that possible? I'll make you Matt. Yeah, I'll make you Matt as well, a co-host. You can just let people in. Usually they help. Thank you. So the question is do you want to take them over time, and then accumulative with your training, you potentially get those benefits? It is one of those ones where it is that consideration. Where was I at? Oh, the biological noise. So the biological noise, what I'm saying here is like and this relates to like that accumulative training effect. I think the big picture here, okay? Think about, is beta-alanine, is the juice worth the squeeze, or is the squeeze worth the juice? Okay. Remember that a lot of other factors will impact the efficacy of any supplement, let alone beta-alanine. So think about things like sleep. Is the quality of your sleep, the duration of your sleep enough to provide you with sufficient rest and recovery? Is your nutrition on point? Is your motivation on a particular day, is that going to impact the efficacy or the ability for beta-alanine to be effective? Okay. So you certainly want to be controlling the controllables outside of the supplementation to ensure that you can see if you are a responder or a non-responder to beta-alanine. Okay. But I guess the big question is, does an increase in performance of say 10 seconds really make a difference to your total race performance? For an average age grouper, maybe 10 seconds is not something that is going to be impactful in the big scheme of things, and you should focus more on your daily nutrition, your hydration, your carbohydrate fueling in training and racing. However, for a very good age grouper or professional athlete, that 10 seconds could be the difference between making it on the podium and winning a world championship or not. So there is that to sort of weigh up. Okay, small effect can be a very large outcome for certain types of athletes, and that's something to think about as well. I guess the biggest drawbacks, as I said, with beta-alanine supplementation is, well, firstly, it may not really have that much of an effect on your overall performance. Secondly, the split dosing 4 times a day to get your dose in is really problematic for a lot of athletes, and they just forget to do it. And then once they've forgotten to do it on one day, does that throw the whole cycle out? And then lastly is this temporary paresthesia, this tingling, because it's not pleasant. If anyone's ever had it, it is, I mean, some people like it. I actually don't mind it, but for some people, they just really hate it and they feel like they're having an allergic reaction. Okay. We'll go through questions at the end. Actually, I think it's better. Bicarb soda, what is it? Bicarb soda is in your kitchen pantry, I'd imagine. It's a very good cleaning agent. It's also used in baking. Do not get this mixed up with baking powder. So bicarb soda is called baking soda or bicarbonate soda. It is not baking powder. If you ingest baking powder, you will make yourself very, very sick very, very quickly. So just make sure there is that distinction. Bicarb soda is a salt, okay? And hence, if you've ever tasted bicarb soda, it is very salty, okay? There is a degree, there's an amount of sodium and there's an amount of bicarbonate, okay? This should say in extracellular buffer, sorry. So this is working in terms of serum acidosis or serum buffering hydrogen ions in your blood, as opposed to intracellular, which is what beta-alanine is doing. And it does this and the way it works is it buffers these hydrogen ions outside the cell in the blood, and that potentially delays muscular acidosis, okay? So it negates the effects of exercise-induced acidosis, not full-blown acidosis, although there is some evidence to suggest that bicarb soda could be useful in those cases as well. But we're not talking about a medical change of acidosis. We're causing about mild acidosis as a result of exercise. Okay. The acute dose. Okay. Studies will range in efficacy from somewhere between 300 milligrams up to 500 milligrams per kilogram. Okay. The higher doses of 400 to 500 milligrams are effective, but maybe just as effective as the 300 milligram per kilogram of body weight whilst if you use the lower dose of around that 300 milligrams, it could maybe reduce the amount of gastrointestinal distress that often comes with bicarbonate soda use. Okay. You definitely want to split this one. Beta-Alanine, you can just toughen up and use it and just go for it and get a hell of a lot of tingling. This one, you have to split. Okay. I've tried splitting it into 2 doses. Now, keep in mind, if I use the 400 milligram dose per kilogram, okay, I'm taking in, if I'm 80, so what's that? I take in around 32 grams, between 32 and 34 grams of bicarb soda. If I split that into 2 16-gram doses, it is horrible. It tastes terrible. And I can tell you now, it will make you very gassy. So you'll get upper GI signs and symptoms, i.e. burping and potentially some regurgitation. And certainly you'll get lower GI with a lot of bloating, a lot of flatulence, and potentially diarrhea. So I would certainly recommend splitting it across multiple doses if you are going to do this. Put each dose in a minimum of 500 mils of water if you are going to do that. Obviously, looking at Maurten, they're not putting it in water, although they are recommending you chase it with water or use some form of water when you are mixing with their hydrogel. In terms of the timing, you can do this 3 to 4 days before an event. You can also do it directly before the event, so somewhere between 60 and 150 minutes before. If you are going to do it before an event, please practice that in training prior, okay? Because it can result in fairly impressive adverse reactions that could derail months of training. So if you are going to consider using bicarb soda, please practice it multiple times and get your dosing right and the timing right. You can use it chronically on lower doses. So this would be more along the lines of maybe 200 to 300 milligrams per kilogram and doing that chronically for 4 weeks. Very hard to continue to do this type of supplementation for 4 weeks because it tastes so bad. So there is always that factor. You might think you're going to be able to do it for 4 weeks and then it just tastes terrible and you just end up not doing it. So the practicalities of this are also very important to consider. What it will benefit you with is repeated efforts. So straight out efforts of say 30 seconds lasting up to 12 minutes, single rep, it will have very little benefit for you. It all comes down to repeated efforts because that's when you'll get this accumulation of hydrogen ions. Okay. Anything with short rest periods, so repeated sprint efforts, that sort of thing, that's where you're going to find this is going to benefit you most. Again, if you think of the sport of triathlon or Ironman, is this applicable for you? Are you going to be doing repeated sprints within it? You know, if you're going up the hill, I guess you've got a hilly course, you're doing repeated efforts up and down there, it potentially could be of benefit. Same if you're doing road cycling and you know there's a fairly undulating course with repeated hills, then certainly it could be of benefit. Marathon, maybe at the end, if you're doing, you know, some, you know, surges and you're doing surges on and off, then it could be beneficial. Same, I guess, with the running component or the swim or the bike in triathlon or Ironman, if you're going to do surges and then sort of relax. But I just don't know how common that's going to be in triathlon or Ironman. Maybe Lauren can put her 2 cents into that when we come to questions. The positive effect on bicarbonate soda is that it does have a positive effect on time to exhaustion. Okay, so it will improve your time to exhaustion, but it will not improve time trial performance. So you've just got to weigh that up. You know, what is it actually going to give you that allows you to benefit from it? It will increase the number of repetitions with a set load or a certain load over a certain period of time and allow you to maintain that power at that same training or that higher intensity. So again, a cumulative training effect potentially. If you've got, you know, once a week repeated sprint efforts and you know you use bicarbonate soda before those, and that's allowing you to train harder, and you do that for 8 to 12 weeks, maybe it helps. Maybe it does offset, maybe it does provide you with those benefits. Certainly, I think we'll see more research about this over time. That's where it could be fine. It could be, you know, beneficial to you in that sense. I think very similar in terms of the bigger picture is think bigger picture. Is this really what's going to make the difference between you having a good race or a not so good race? Or is the bigger picture focused on your day-to-day nutrition, your race nutrition, your race hydration strategy? For most people, it's going to be the latter rather than the former, but for some athletes, this could be the difference. I think the split dose, again, 4 times a day, remembering to do this. Most people forget to even eat protein at the best of times, or even take creatine once a day or something like that. So I think, you know, if you're struggling to take your fish oils once a day, then probably don't consider taking bicarb soda 4 times a day, would be my takeaway from this. And in terms of GI complaints, it can be spectacular, okay? You know, both ends, it can all go very, very wrong if you get this wrong. So just remember, if you are going to try bicarb soda, and it is extremely cheap, you can buy it in, you know, again, do you need to buy it from Maurten? No, you don't. You can just go to your supermarket and buy it for $1. You can use it and try it, but just think big picture, I think. The other things to think about with this is it seems to be that training level will affect the efficacy of bicarb soda. So whilst this is being pushed on very elite athletes, the training level is, if you're an amateur and not highly trained, you'll probably see bigger responses to this as an amateur or an untrained athlete versus a highly trained athlete, which is a bit ironic given the positioning of the product. Regarding sex, males, females, females will tend to be able to do time to exhaustion with repetitive efforts better than men anyway, and this is probably related to menstrual hormones, in particular estrogen. So that is something just to factor in. Women may not feel as different on this because of their ability, their increased ability to already deal with repeated sprint efforts. So that's something to consider. And then I think the last thing is this like responder versus non-responder effect of any supplement. And, you know, even with creatine, there is a non-responder element of people. So how you respond to bicarb soda could be completely individualized, and that's something to factor in. Maybe on the flip side of that, if you believe it's going to make you superhuman and do lots of things, then the power of placebo is very, very strong as well. So that is something to consider. Okay. Everyone wants to talk about the Maurten bicarb system. So I know we had a lot of questions about this. I think the tub is really cool. I think they've done a great job in producing a really cool product. It's 3-part series. I think there's a bowl, there's a hydrogel, which they say is not the same hydrogel as their existing gels, although I don't understand why it wouldn't be the same hydrogel. But anyway, it's got 39 grams of carbs in it, which I think is interesting. The way their bicarb system works, and I was doing some reading around this, so they have this bicarb system 15, 19, 22, 25. So for me, I would have to take 2 systems, I guess. I would have to get like the bicarb system 19 and 15 and take that, which would, as you can see, supply me with a fair bit of sodium, about 10 grams of sodium if I was taking in those two amounts of products, which I thought was pretty interesting. The price of those two systems together is probably going to be pretty exorbitant as well. So I think you've just got to remember, roughly speaking, you're taking in 400 milligrams based on, well, let's say 300 milligrams is the minimum effective dose. So 300 milligrams, you know, yeah, 20, I guess for me, yeah, maybe 24, maybe I could take the bicarb system 25 and get away with that. They talk about these bicarb mini tablets, which they've developed. There's not really that much information about them, but I am assuming that these mini tablets still contain the amount of sodium bicarbonate that is required to get the effect based on the literature. They do say these mini tablets don't sit in the gut like capsules and therefore are assisted in terms of gastric emptying. I mean, the point about that is that I think anything to go from the stomach into the small intestine needs to be less than, what is it? It's a micro, it's like half a micro, I want to say microcentimeter, but that's not correct. It is minuscule in terms of the size of the particle. So regardless if these are mini tablets or capsules, they still have to break down to a very small particle size in order to travel through. So again, I'm not 100% sure on what the mini tablet science is versus what normal bicarbonate soda in powder form would be. Again, I wouldn't prescribe athletes to be consuming bicarb in capsule form either. I just think mix it into water and drink it that way. And that way it's going through as a liquid, which would bypass the system very, very quickly. Interestingly, reading their website, they say that they believe doses of around 0.25 grams or 250 milligrams per kilo body weight is the suitable dose, or up to 0.3 grams per kilo body weight. So certainly the 0.3 grams or 300 milligrams per kilo body weight is the optimal dose based on all the literature and the systematic reviews I've read and the meta-analyses. So you certainly want to make sure that if you are using the Maurten bicarb system, that you are choosing the total amount of grams that you require from sodium bicarbonate based on a 0.3 gram or 300 milligrams per kilo body weight. Has anyone used it? Has anyone used it yet? No, not yet. I'd be interested to know what it's like. I'd like to know what it tastes like. I actually was playing around yesterday, mixing bicarbonate in with precision hydration and a few other things and trying to eat it. And I put in way too much. I put in 16. Again, I was trying to do a two split dose of 16 grams. And my God, it tasted terrible. So I'm just going to play around with slightly lower doses and see. Again, do I think bicarbonate soda is going to help me a lot? Probably not. But it is interesting to play around with, and certainly a lot cheaper if you do it yourself. I think something that's really interesting is that, and this was from one of the systematic reviews, is that co-supplementation of sodium bicarbonate with beta-alanine supplementation actually created the largest effect size. So maybe everyone's got it wrong, and maybe we should be mixing bicarb with beta-alanine and then some carbs, and then you maybe double up the effect. So again, thinking about is the cost, the time, the effort for these particular supplements. Is it the biggest bang for buck that you should be focusing on? The majority of athletes, I'm going to say no. I think they're the sprinkles on top. Cool science. You could play around with it if you want, but do not rely on this to get you through a 70.3 or Ironman. If you're kicking goals and finishing on podiums consistently and things like that, and really, doing everything your coach wants you to do, and you are actually doing all the training and doing all the basic nutrition very well, then certainly considering sodium bicarbonate, maybe in conjunction with beta-alanine, could be the next step for you. But yeah, at this point in time, I would say focus on the big stuff. This is a paper, beta-alanine supplementation. It is a systematic review and meta-analyses, and this is where a lot of the information was taken from. A very good paper. I believe it is actually free access if you just search that on PubMed. And then this is the effect of Sodium bicarbonate, again, systematic review with meta-analyses, looking at all different types of sports. And again, yeah, really cool papers. That was 2021 as well. So that's very recent. And it will give you a very nice breakdown on the effects of sodium bicarbonate and how it works. Any questions? That's I'll close the share. Sorry about the start of that. It was a little bit disjointed, but got there in the end. We got some questions. Now listen, yes, when I lift off season. Is that the beta-alanine you take, Lauren?
Yes.
And you're doing that for, I mean, it's interesting. I was looking at beta-alanine supplementation for strength, changes in strength. I didn't cover this, but cross-sectional area and strength gains and improvements in 1 rep max. And there wasn't actually any changes. There was some changes in terms of ability to lift more repetitions at 60% 1 RM. But when it came to changes in actual cross-sectional area of muscle and total strength gains, beta-alanine didn't seem to have any impact, which I thought was interesting from that perspective as well. So do you find it's beneficial to you though?
I didn't really find a change. I didn't feel a change when I use it for lifting, but sorry, I'm riding my bike in case anyone can't.
That's all right, as well.
Here. So what I'm getting from what you're sharing today is when I'm doing like minute max efforts on the bike early season, maybe that makes more sense to use these supplements and certainly stay away from bicarbonate for racing. That just sounds like a bad mix.
I think beta-alanine could be cycled throughout the training season. It's relatively cheap. You know, Clean, KLEAN, is one product which does NSF capsules of beta-alanine. I would subscribe to taking capsules of beta-alanine. It's just easier. I think their capsules come in 1.6 gram doses as well. So you take 2 in the morning, 2 in the evening. I can think of one particular athlete who swears by it, Pat Romano, very good age group athlete, you know, in his mid-50s. And we cycle. He's been a long-term client of mine. He cycles beta-alanine on and off 4 weeks, you know, before races. And he swears by it. He thinks that it really helps him. He thinks it helps with repeated sprint efforts in training and racing when he's really got to put the foot down. So do I use it with professional athletes? Yeah, I do. Is it a bit of trial and error? I think finding out how it works. Yeah. As I said, just like Lauren, yeah, I think for you, it could be something to consider for in season and getting those levels right. Again, you're in a maybe slightly different position to some of the other athletes on Fuelin. So I think it's just weighing it up and seeing what's right. I think in terms of the Bicarb Soda, like Bicarb Soda is one of the actual supplements that like the International Olympic Committee will actually put their hand up and say it works, which is very rare for a supplement. So Bicarb Soda works. I think the drawback with it is the potential for GI complaints, but that's where potentially, again, depending on how serious you are in this, maybe chronic supplementation or at least 3 to 4 days of supplementation of bicarb prior to a race, if you know you're very comfortable with it, could actually be really beneficial in those parts of the race, maybe the start of the swim when everyone goes out really hard, maybe efforts on the bike, and then certainly when you've got to do surges on the run. It could make a difference as well. But I think to your point, Lauren, don't go and do it the day of the race. If, you know, it's going to, like taking it the morning of the race, you know, with your race breakfast and all that other stuff, it's just got a bit of a recipe for disaster, I think. So bicarb should be probably taken more on either a subacute or a chronic basis rather than a really acute sort of standpoint, unless you're very comfortable with it. Make sense? She's on the trainer. Any questions? Matt, Les, Ginny, you joined late. Brendan, do any of you use it? No. Have you ever thought about using it? Not really.
Never
Yeah.
heard of it until your presentation or your email.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Had you heard of the Maurten one?
No, but that's not that surprising, I guess. I'm not really into
Yeah.
this for a long time.
Yeah. Look, the Maurten product, like I'm going to play around with it a bit, like, just using standard gels and mixing smaller amounts in and seeing if it's a little bit more tolerable and whether it does offset some of those GI issues. I'm not convinced that, again, if you use the Maurten hydrogel as the gel that you would mix the bicarb soda into and maybe mix it in maybe 6 to 8 gram doses, then it probably won't taste, it'll be this sweet, salty sort of gel that you just sort of consume. It probably will taste okay if you like sweet, salty stuff, and gives you what, 25 grams of carbs, gives you your bicarb. You have 4 of them a day. Maybe you're doing that for three days leading into a race or something like that. It could be beneficial. I think it's one of those ones where we might see more research coming out about, subacute or more chronic supplementation with, say, bicarb soda and potentially plus or minus beta-alanine over those 4 weeks, and see if that makes bigger differences to, endurance athletes and certainly sprint performance.
On one of your slides, you listed the chronic dosage, and I think it said 600 milligrams per kilogram. But that was higher than the acute dosage. Is that right?
Yeah, it is, which is really weird. And I think the reason they're saying that is you're taking larger doses at a particular time, but the total amount of bicarb is a little bit lower. So, but they're not worrying about GI because you're not worried about it affecting you around racing, is my understanding. So you're taking slightly higher doses but total dose is a little bit lower over time.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, look, I would, based on experience with athletes and myself, I would take lower doses.
Yeah.
So, and like bicarb soda, honestly, if you look in your cupboard, you'll have it there.
Yeah.
It's literally, $1 from Costco or wherever. So, some of the best supplements that we have access to are actually the cheapest, i.e. creatine, bicarb soda. Well, beta-alanine is not actually that expensive either. So you can have a look at it. But yeah, I mean, interested. Most people will have had a taste of beta-alanine from pre-workout supplements. Most pre-workouts will contain some form of beta-alanine in it, and as I said, unless that beta-alanine or that pre-supplement is part of your total dosing regime, then really it's a bit of a waste of time. It's more about the cumulative dose and the total dose of beta-alanine over the course of the day and over those 4 weeks. That's the key factor. Cool. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, hopefully that was a little bit different on supplements and a little bit more, it's something, it's like a nice to have, I think, is where I put these 2 supplements. The next one we'll probably do is probably on nitrates and betaine, which again, I think nitrates, you could argue, is sort of sits potentially alongside like omegas and creatine. They might be something you just should be taking on a daily basis for health reasons, and betaine maybe sits alongside that as well, although there's slightly different areas of research around betaine and what you could do with that, but they're all from a fairly similar food group and whatnot. So we'll see if you like that one as well. But I think next week is Ask Me Anything, so shoot through any questions you might have, and then we'll take it from there. Please leave some feedback at the end, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.